Good afternoon. I'm here to talk to you a little about inclusion. The voice of inclusion of yours, mine, and ours. We must create a rich educational setting for all children. Our goal is that all children can learn in the school setting. A school should not be just a preparation for life. It should really be life. Research has showed us that the more time that children with disabilities spend in regular education classes, the more they achieve as adults in employment and continuing education, regardless of gender, race, type of disability, or age. And that research was done in 1989. There's no research that has a compelling body that tells us that we really need to demonstrate that special ed, segregated special ed classes, our programs have a significant benefit for others. The pendulum has swung. Special education was designed to be a resource, but what we have done is place it in the opposite direction as a special placement. Now we have swung back to saying that it needs to be included and the kids back in the regular classroom. As soon as we take away students' sense of belonging, we completely undermine their capacity to learn the skills that will enable them to belong. They can't belong until they learn, but they can't learn because they're being prevented from belonging. Our autism statistics were stated for the last few years as 1 in 88 births estimated in the spectrum. In March of this year, it came out as 1 in 50 births estimated in the spectrum. Rising rates, better identification, both, of course, are happening. It's also declared that it's presented before the age of 3, but the diagnosis often comes later. Most of this research has happened and looked at children between the ages of 6 and 8. So what about the births of today? Are our figures going to be different? We found that autism is found in all cultures and economic groups. It's found around the world. It's 5 times more common in boys. The difficult thing about the autism is that the cognitive range ranges from severe cognitive impairment to the highly gifted child. And of course, many of the gifted ones have what we consider as splinter skills, gifted in some areas and not gifted in other areas. There's a chart that was put out in 2006, actually, that showed the differences in the different states of the rays in autism. As we can see, they really jumped. What would the chart today show? Autism is really a triad of impairments: communication, social, and behavior. But if you think about that, that is what runs our life for all things. Behavior is affected by communication, affects socialization, affects behavior. The 3 go together. When we look at what autism is, it's a processing difference. Children with autism process language, process communication, social interaction, sensory response, learning and thinking in many different ways. But didn't we learn back in college that many children learn in different ways? If you question who's on the autism spectrum, take time to go to this website and take the autism quiz. You may be surprised just where you fall on the spectrum. There was a book put out called 10 Things Your Student with Autism Wishes You Knew by Ellen Nottbaum. She has a son with autism, and together they came up with a book and talked about the different things that really impact the student in the classroom. Some of the things that they go through and talk about are one-channel wiring, specific to general, need to see to learn, Gestalt learning or chunking, sameness and routines, organization, concrete terms. Let's look at each one of these individually. One-channel wiring. What does that really mean? It means you process information typically through one channel. Now, if we all think about our own learning ways, some of us are more visual, some more tactical, some more auditory. I have seen in colleges where a student can listen to a complete lecture, take no notes, and go home and put down the notes and important things of that. Strictly an auditory learner. Some of us have to take notes. We're much more of a visual. I myself prefer pictures. I like to be able to see the whole picture. So as you see, we all process things differently, and so do children with autism. Many times they have struggle with the multisensory modalities, difficulty with multiple tasks, very concrete learners, very one thing at a time. So those are things that we have to realize that is happening, why they may not be learning in your classroom. They think differently. The neurotypical brain, that's most of us, think usually in general to specific. We have brain strategies that take in, organizes our information, cross-reference it, like a computer in your brain. Whereas the students with autism typically think specific to general. Their information exists in concrete boxes. Think of their brain as a warehouse filled with unrelated information, with no organization system. For a typical warehouse, there would be some way of knowing that if you need a certain thing, you go to a certain aisle, a certain shelf, and that is where it's at. But their brain doesn't necessarily organize that way, and so it has to be taught to be redirected. They also have a very difficult time with generalizing. So if we take this in one situation, we typically can generalize it to another situation. That is, I think, the biggest area of need for children with autism in the classroom is the generalization. We have to teach them how to categorize, how to apply concepts, how to identify cause and effects, how to look at multiple things. What if A doesn't work? Then let's try B, let's try C. Those are things we need to teach. Many of them are visual spatial learners. But notice I say many, not all. And you have to be very careful to generalize. Each child with autism is unique, just like the rest of us are. But too often we hear the word autism and we just try to place the kids into, oh, they fit into this box, they all look alike. But remember, they are unique individuals and they will process their academics, their behavior uniquely and different from the next one that comes along. Information needs to be delivered in words that come and go in an instant. When you deliver that information, where does it stick? Think about your own learning. Oftentimes, we learn things and we forget it the next day, or we learn it long enough to put it down on that quiz, that test, whatever we need, and then that information is gone until it's retrieved later. But is it in the same parameters when you retrieve it later as at that point in time. It's important to chunk learning rather than go by the step-by-step for children with autism. They do learn in a chunking process rather than that typical analytical process. That's where you find that the concrete terminology, the first and second grades, they are quite successful. As we get into abstract learning, they often will fall down. They have a difficulty with assigning inferential meaning to parts in the whole. There is an extreme dependence on routine and sameness. You find that sometimes with the clothes they may wear. I commented one time that a young man looked very nice in his blue polo shirt. And his mother commented back to me was, "You should see his closet. That's all he has in his closet, 10 blue polo shirts." She had found over time that no matter how hard she tried to introduce other colors, other styles, whatever, that he went back and felt comfortable in that. And that was going to be his routine. The sameness. Not all of them think that way. It doesn't always happen, but typically you'll find that they have a difficult time processing change. Change to us may mean a new set of clothes every day, new colors, new whatever. We're comfortable with that. But with the individual with autism, often they aren't comfortable with change. Knowing the parts of the day that will be the same is important. It reduces the anxiety of living in a typically baffling world. So if you think about how do you feel in a strange town? What if you moved from rural Iowa, small town, you knew everybody, you knew the streets, you knew how to get around, everything was great, that's where you grew up. And then we plucked you out of there and put you in downtown Manhattan and told you that you need to get to work on time, you need to do this, you need to find your parking place, and gave you a whole list of things. Very baffling, right? So that's what we have to remember about the student with autism. They interpret things in a very literal manner, very concrete. Metaphors, idioms, figurative language are really not part of their mindset. When they do learn an idiom, they'll hear it in a place, and then they'll use it somewhere else along the line, but usually it's not in the same type of setting, therefore it sounds very out of place. So what they're doing is chunking that piece of learning, but they're not reusing that in another generalizing setting that is correct. They have a difficulty summarizing. That leads into comprehension. What is school all about? Comprehension. Abstract concepts groupings are difficult. You've heard a lot about theory of mind. What theory of mind tells us is it's the prospect-taking abilities. It's the social skill that involves considering the thoughts, feelings, and attitudes and beliefs of others before we act or speak. Now take a young child. Before they've really learned the prospect thinking, the 3-year-old in the store that turns and says to mommy, "That lady's fat." We all laugh it off because a 3-year-old really hasn't learned that yet. But when the 12-year-old says to their parent out loud so everyone can hear, "That lady is fat," they have not understood that that is a skill that isn't said in private, that is something said in private, not out loud, and the fact that it hurts other people's feelings. The ability to actively consider and adjust to the thoughts and emotions of others. Very important. Somehow along the line, most of us just learn it automatically. It's not something necessarily taught. Our parents will probably say, "You don't say that out loud in public." And we understand not to say it out loud in public again. But the point with children with autism is that doesn't make an impact on them. So how do these things affect the classroom? What implications do communication, socialization, behavioral impairments have in the classroom? Many of these children will have an IEP. Some of them won't. But let's look. What does the IEP do? Present levels are always on the IEP. It's a description of a child's abilities and needs. Goals. These are where we address the area of needs. And for a child with autism, we should have communication, social, maybe sensory, and academic. We have to have it measurable, and we have to have it implemented across settings. So when we look at developing these goals, we look at meeting the child's needs that result from their disability. We want that child to be able to be involved and progress in the general education curriculum. So how do we take these goals as a teacher and move this forward from the goal, design the strategy, how do we implement it? What are the steps we use? And the question always comes up, how do we measure progress? We should use a decision-making process. We should look at, first, of course, the student active participation without any kind of modification. And then take down the steps. Can they do this goal without additional modification? Do they need more help? Do we need to make a change in delivery of the format, classroom environment? And so what we're doing is actually going down the list from the least invasive to where maybe this child for this particular goal will need a personal assistance. They may need adult assistance. They may need peer assistance. So you're looking at the change of looking at the steps from least amount of assistance to the most amount. How do we embed the strategy into the curriculum? Question that's always asked. Strategies and tactics are vitally necessary. They're the nuts and bolts of education. Every teacher uses strategies every day to teach what she teaches. So it's really not a new thing that we're talking about. Now, are we talking about different strategies? Maybe we are. When we design effective instruction, we talk about the learning environment, we talk about evaluation or assessment, we talk about curriculum decisions, we talk about instructional strategies. General ed teachers, this is what you do for math, for science, for reading, for whatever comes up. Now, when we look at a specific goal for a student with autism, we may look at the enablers checklist put out by the Indiana Resource Center for Autism. And what it does is it just helps us do a little framework of what we're needing to look at and how to implement. And basically, once again, it's good for all learners. The checklist goes down some different things. It looks at routines, schedules, it looks at expectations, it looks at rehearsal strategies, stimulus cues, environmental adaptations, peer supports, and motivation schedules. So let's look at some of these. Consistent routines and schedules. Once again, visual schedules, common language, checklists, calendars. We all use calendars. We have a calendar on our wall at home, or on the fridge for the month. We use schedules in order to know what to do, when to do. Remind us of doctor appointments. Remind us of maybe it's the PTA meeting. We use schedules in our everyday. Now we have a lot of mobile devices that we use, and we put our calendar into it. So why is it so difficult to say we need to be using this for our children? Sometimes they need a much more active schedule. Sometimes they need just that knowledge of expectation. This happens first and this happens next. We sometimes fall into the trap of rattling off what's going to happen for the day, and we've planned it, and so it's in our brain. We know what we're going to do, but maybe it was new for the child sitting in that front row and just hearing, or maybe they were listening to the child next to them whispering and didn't hear what you were saying. That knowledge is very important. Rehearsal strategies, very important. You know, if you're a piano player and you're going to perform, you're going to rehearse. And you're going to rehearse your entire part. You're going to rehearse, if it's up on the stage, you're going to rehearse walking across the stage, sitting down on the piano bench, and putting your music up, or maybe you don't have your music, you have it memorized. Pause, and then you start playing your piece. What happens at the end? Do you play the last note, jump and run off the stage? No. We've been taught that you play the last note, audience applauds, you stand up, you bow, and then you walk off the stage. I'm sure some of you have been pianists along the line and have had this practice. So when we're talking rehearsal strategies, that's just one thing about it. There are social stories, role playing, visualization, comic strip conversations, a lot of tools out there to rehearse what we're going to do. Also, we can use theme boards, step by step. This is an example of what we'd probably see in a preschool or kindergarten. What happens at the end of the day? Where do you go? You get your coat. You put on your coat. You zip up your coat, especially in cold weather. You get your lunch kit, you get your backpack, and you wave goodbye. I've always said it's very important that we use the visual supports of the pictures and also the words, because we have to be knowledgeable about the fact that some kids are reading the words. So this also gives them another component of where they see the words connected with the picture, and it's a way of teaching the words for the items on the pictures. So we break down those kind of things and utilize that. Now, you're saying, what do I utilize in the elementary classroom or the high school classroom? No, we usually don't need the pictures, but for a student that may need those pictures, they can have that in one of their binders so that they have their own private little schedule of what to do and when to do. But we have those lists up on the board. I was in a classroom one time and I asked the teacher where the schedule was, and they walked over to the wall and they pointed to a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and said, "There's the schedule." And that meant that I had to walk over there to read the schedule on the wall. Now, how many students are going to get up, know where the schedule is, and walk over there and read the schedule? And the teacher commented that, well, I showed him the schedule the first of the year. Well, sometimes schedules change. And, you know, it was shown at the first of the year. Did everyone memorize it? Did they do a test to see if everyone knew it? Those are just things that we need to remember and think about. We know the schedule because we're the ones that put it together, but that doesn't mean that the student necessarily really understands the schedule. Academic strategies cover a lot of things. The thing to be aware of is that typically for a student with autism, many times it will take them twice as long to finish what their neurotypicals around them can do. Rushing them, prodding them to get it done quicker, typically results in shutting down. There are strategies, there are ways. We can shorten assignments. We can have them do every other one. We can allow them extra time. There are ways to get around that. But just remember that they do process things many times typically slower in the classroom than the other students around them. Organization, structure, we talked about those. Note-taking handout. One of the things to remember is very difficult, remember, for them to multitask. Therefore, if you have notes on an overhead, notes written on the board, and you're talking about them, typically the child cannot listen to your talking and be writing down the notes. And what you're telling them usually is expanding upon the notes. Very important information. You may be describing something that is very important where just the notes really don't tell the whole story. So it's important. Have them have a copy of the notes if that's what you need to do. There are many ways. Sometimes, rather than just giving them a whole copy of the notes, maybe have some blanks so they can fill in the words on the notes so that you're keeping them actively involved. You'll have to look at the individual student to see what level they're at. Definition sheets. Slow down and do not bombard with information. We get excited about a topic, or it's the same topic we have taught year after year after year, semester after semester, and we start moving very fast. We give a lot of information. Not every student in that classroom is going to get all that information, and especially your ones that are having more difficulties with understanding that. It's important to teach to identify cause and effect. We understand cause and effect, and many little children learn cause and effect real quickly. But for some reason, that doesn't work as well in the autistic brain. And so it's something that we have to really work on, is teaching what the cause and effects are. Offer real choices. It's really not a real choice when you say, do this now, or go to the principal's office. Well, if the student doesn't want to do it, maybe the principal's office is more fun anyway. So think about your choices when you offer them. Offer the choice that is really ends up in what you want to happen. Let's look at a goal example in math. Now, Betty is in 3rd grade, and the goal was written as, at the end of 36 weeks, yes, the goals are written for 1 year, Betty will identify geometric representations for points, lines, perpendicular lines, parallel lines, angles, and rays on a weekly classroom test on an average of 9 out of 10 times. Looks like a lot of things. But when you teach math for that year, you're not going to teach all of those all at once. You're going to teach one thing at a time, or 2 things, and you're going to progress through. Very important to teach her what the terms mean. We make too many assumptions. We make an assumption that a child understands really what a parallel line is. So use your visual cues and make certain that they know what the terminology is and what it is. Teach in chunks. Teach in small groups. Implementation. Use a cheat sheet to begin with. Those visual examples are very important so that you can see what I'm going back to, refer back to that visual example. Small group instruction. Those children in your class that are taking the assignment, running with it, working on it, maybe take a small group aside and work with those that are struggling. Include that child with autism. So it's a strategy that can work with all of your kids in your classroom. Data collection. We all just hate data collection because we're thinking it's one more thing we have to do. You take data collection in your classroom every day. You gather in their homework and you score it. That's data collection. You give quizzes. You give them reports. There's just many ways that we're all taking data collection. Now, we have a specific goal here. So for Betty, yes, I'm going to take that extra moment when I look at her homework to say, are these particular things, is she making progress on or not? Maybe that's 5 minutes extra time. But basically, your data collection is already embedded into your curriculum. Don't view it necessarily as an extra thing to do. Look at language. Language sometimes is one of the most difficult things to look at. We say, how do we gauge? We have our reading, and we have our different word list and our spelling lists and all of those that happen at the elementary end. Here we say Betty will read a paragraph, 4 to 5 specified events at 3rd grade level. She'll retell the content of the story independently 8 out of 10 times. What we're really looking at here is comprehension. We're also looking at is the ability to organize her thoughts. Can she read that paragraph? Can she retell that paragraph with the comprehension and with the sequence of events? Sometimes you'll see that the way they retell it is by the last event that they read and backwards. Sometimes they aren't organized at all. So that's what we are looking for when we look at these language goals. Key thing is to go back. What is the main idea? Use your highlighters. Take a copy of that on paper because we can't use our highlighters in our books, but utilize that visual component so that Betty can learn. What is the main idea? And then what are the other events that go through? Visual graphing of stories. Small group modeling. Take 3 or 4 students. Take one of your best students, one of your middle of the road students, and a couple that are having problems. And let that best student model what is correct and go down the line and work through that. Sometimes you'll find that students will learn better from their peers than they will from us as adults. Assessment. It's the ongoing process for the purpose of designing instructional program to meet the individual needs of each child in your classroom. You use it to modify your instruction. You go through a chapter, you give a quiz, they're all doing okay, you give them that final test, and they only get 50% of it. So then you sit down and think, what did I miss in my instructional practices? Same thing that we need to look at with the children with autism. What components did they miss? Why did they miss it? How do I enrich that? How do I teach it differently? Very important to articulate our expectations of performance to the student, to all the adults that work with the class and students, and to the parents. The key to success is everyone on the same page. If the environment has different expectations, you'll find that your student becomes very overwhelmed. Difficult, I know, when we go to the middle school and high schools, where different teachers teach different ways. But if we can come to agree to the same expectations, come to the table, and everyone has the same list of expectations, we will find a much more success with all our students. It's important to share with our paraprofessionals that are in the classroom, with our resource teachers that are team teaching nowadays. Make sure that we have sat down and talked about these expectations, and this is where we're headed. Involve the parents to the degree that they are willing to be involved. Many of them work, they have maybe one job, they have other children at home, they have a lot of responsibilities on their plate also. But when we have a parent that can reinforce what we're doing at school, and remember I said reinforce, not teach more, but if they reinforce what we have taught all day, that gives double the time to that student to learn what we're trying to teach. So it's a very key part is if we can reinforce that learning. Our environments are going to be different. We have to recognize that, and we can do that. Learning differences are going to be present in every classroom, whether the child has autism or some other disability. Our instructional strategies are the nuts and bolts of education. Our assessment is an ongoing process. All children are able to learn, just not in the same way. A key to remember, and I know when you have a classroom of 30 children, some days it seems overwhelming, but each child will learn in their own way, and can be very successful in the end. In part 2, I'm going to talk more about communication, social skills, and behaviors. So I'll look forward to your questions at the end of this session and look forward to seeing you again in part 2.